Hey, welcome to the Free Gin Podcast. This is my dad and his dad. And we talk about a specific topic for each episode that we find relevant and interesting. And we're going to start today's podcast with an article that my dad brought to the table, which was called... I don't know, because
You don't have it there?
I don't have it here. I have it... It is called... What is it? It's like... Because all article names are terrible because they're really long. How evangelical voters swung from Carter to Trump.
Yep, that's what it was called.
I thought it was interesting as I do kind of find it interesting, but I also I'm younger, and I feel like this applies to you guys more because you actually were alive when Carter was
was president. Yeah,
when he was president. And on top of that, I think a lot of this is more it's like my perspective as someone who's younger and kind of into the youth politics, which is a lot dumber, where people know more, but they're also stupider for the fact that they know more. That's how I would describe it. That's how I describe youth politics.
Okay.
So, let's start with you, Dad. If what you kind of thought of it, since you're the one who presented it. Why did you bring it up?
The reason I brought it up, it was an article that I read, and I actually didn't bring it up really so much for, what the title of the article was about. It was about how this transition of evangelicals from going to a bloc that would vote for someone like Jimmy Carter back in the 70s to a bloc that would now vote for someone like Donald Trump in 2016, and number of them that continue to support him even now. And, if you look at those two kind of characters, they seem quite polar opposites.
Well, they're both politicians, so.
But they're both politicians, right? So, but I wasn't presenting the article so much about that. I think the thing that struck me in the article is someone who, you're right, as someone who remembers Jimmy Carter being president. I mean, I was in elementary school when he was president. But remembering that, and then remembering post Jimmy Carter with the Reagan years and that, and how kind of bad-mouthed he was in terms of, as a president, by people. I think what I was taken aback by in the article is, as a Christian, I don't think there is a greater example of somebody who lived their life or who has lived their life Christ-like. In that kind of somebody in that, who was president and had the world stage as being a president, and that even as president, he lived his life in a Christ-like manner, I would say. And that's probably why people didn't like him in the end, and ridiculed him. But if you look at his post-presidency and what he accomplished and did after he became president, and used that platform of that he was president, even for just the 4 years he was, and not being a popular president, he used that to do incredible things for peace in the world, for helping people, serving people, loving people in a Christ-like manner.
I have no idea because
we do not see, any president even since him, we have not seen that example. And yeah, it's just amazing what he did and has done.
I'm going to need an example here
Habitat
because
for Humanity that he started, all of the work that he did going to different countries, helping with their elections to make sure that they were fair as possible. What he's done for democracy in the world is more than any president since him has done. And it should be greatly appreciated. So that was really my take from it, was much more about that than necessarily what the article was titled and where it was kind of getting at. Just my impression of Jimmy Carter as a Christian is somebody that should be looked up to.
So I'll chime in then. Yeah, I remember him very well as president, and I was elated that an evangelical Christian such as he was president. And I have to admit that how he got treated, especially by evangelical Christians, took me by surprise, because that was not the way I saw him. I thought he indeed did well. He very intelligent person, naval background. I mean, he established himself in the military, in the Navy, and the only thing that seemed to turn the tide against him was his failed attempt to get the hostages out of Iran.
Right.
And that seemed to change things for him. However, and I have the same view of him now too, Eric, as you look backward and you see what he's done. I evaluate him the same way as you. He has in post-presidency years has shown himself to be, I would say, one of the best presidents we've ever had in terms of example and model. Now, one of the things that I wanted to bring to the article, though, and maybe it's a correction, is the book by Kristen Dumais, who is a professor of history here at Calvin. And it's a book called Jesus and John Wayne. What the point she makes in her book is that Trump is not an aberration for evangelical Christians.
Right.
In fact, he fits very well in terms of, as she looked at evangelical Christians and their history and what they were standing for and looking for. Trump fit exactly what they wanted. And it was Carter who was the aberration. Carter was the exception. And I think your article is good and on the point in that there really wasn't any organization of evangelical Christians when Carter was president. He just suddenly, whoop, there he is.
Right.
And so kind of evangelical Christians sort of said, yeah, let's rally around him, not thinking much other than, hey, he's one of us. That was the immediate reaction. But then as evangelical Christians said, hey, we've got to get into politics, because up to that point, they really weren't much involved at all. In fact, they abhorred getting their hands dirty in politics and so on. And so when Moral Majority came around and Falwell organized it, because of that organization, it could be used for clout in changing people's opinion.
Right.
And it is a Moral Majority that turned the tide really or turned the attitude of evangelical Christians against Jimmy Carter and what he stood for. But my point is that Jimmy Carter becoming president as an evangelical Christian was a bit of a fluke.
Right.
And when you look at, so the title on this, How Evangelical Voters Swung from Carter to Trump, I guess I want to put that thesis of Kristen DeMay in the discussion and say, well, DeMay shows history going all the way back to the 19th century, where evangelical Christians were, and how they viewed themselves, how they viewed politics, how they viewed people in politics, and so on. It was what she was arguing is that it's the strong bias of white patriarchal Christian nationalism that is in the evangelical Christian history that is really the force that allowed them to accept Trump as a hero,
right?
And then Carter could never be that kind of hero because he wasn't patriarchal. He didn't stand for Christian nationalism. I mean, he had all these things that didn't fit them. So evangelical Christians, even today, are strongly Trumpians. Many of them, 81%, according to DeMay, even evangelical Christians voted for him, and they still probably are strongly for him. And I shake my head. I'm after reading DeMay, then my eyes were open, but up to that point, they weren't. And the interesting thing, as I read DeMay's book, Jesus and John Wayne, I was kind of a fan of John Wayne.
Right.
And when I was young, I thought, John Wayne.
I always liked Clint Eastwood, but for him it's easier because
that's later.
Hey, I know it's later. I can say but I'm just saying that's my Western hero. I mean, okay. My professor, when I went into class with like a poncho and a hat, he called me that.
Called you Clint?
He called me Clint Eastwood.
Clint?
Yeah, because I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic because I'm talking about Westerns, but what's funny is you could probably like Clint Eastwood better even if he was more like John Wayne in the fact that he doesn't really seem to care. Like, he has his ideas and he doesn't really care what everyone else has of him, and there's not really, I don't know, it's a different attitude, most things.
Mm-hmm.
My thing in the article is that I kind of was more interested in the political side of it, in the question of if so I was interested in this in two respects, and one is can like the Democrat Party bring in Christian evangelicals into their party, like in any actual way? Would you say that's even possible? I think you're saying no, Grandpa.
20% of them they can.
20%. Okay.
20% of them they do. Yeah.
Okay. Just do like but you don't think they can bring any more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I was thinking through it, and my main thing is again I deal in with younger politics. A lot of that's more cynical. It's a lot more of you don't my favorite political analyzer, what is that called? Analyst. He often says that politicians don't matter. There are no political heroes. There never can be, and there never were. And I kind of agree with that, especially when you look through history. I think the only ones you can really ever have for a political hero is at most a war hero. someone like when you're starting a nation. The moment that your nation starts, the world becomes so much more blurrier, especially in a nation like America, where there's so many different factions, so many different groups. You can only at most be a hero to one person, to one group. And once you become that, then
that's right.
Once you become the hero of one group, you're never getting elected again because it means that no one else likes you.
That's right.
I mean, that might be what ends up killing Trump in the end, is the fact that he might have become too much of like one group, like for one group. People kind of had that perception of him. But yeah, I was thinking, like, to me, it's always interesting because I probably listen, like everyone I listen to in politics they're all atheists. None of them, like the only like 5, like, are religious. Not 5. 5 would be too many. It would be like 1, 2. All the people who I know who are Christians, who are like all the political people I've ever listened to who are Christians are military. They're in the military. They don't do politics. And to me, so for me, like religion is often an idea of, do you uphold kind of traditional Christian idealism, or do you replace it for a modernist populist ideal? That's typically what the arguments are for. And that's what I feel like a lot. That's more of what kind of, my, like, the youth online politics is about, which doesn't matter. So I guess I don't really have much to say.
Well,
I mean, I don't know about Jimmy Carter. I think most people most people kind of just don't see him as relevant, large percentage. And again, reading that article, I kind of did understand why, at least its way of seeing things. I understood why it had that, because it does, like, I thought it was kind of funny is going from, and again, your guys is a different experience, but from going from Carter to Reagan, in which it was whereas like 2 things which you could really kind of apply to him, which, I don't know, I guess, like, in like the fact of like Reagan is someone who is polar opposite of Carter, and it didn't go into enough detail. It just kind of gave 2 kind of negative things against him, which was, I think it was a bill he passed, and then the fact that he was a movie star, and the fact that he was divorced twice, which one of those doesn't matter. I don't think most people, at least, I kind of understand why the divorce is brought up, but like, I don't know if that matters that much.
It didn't matter, so it wouldn't matter today.
It wouldn't matter today. I guess it would matter more back then.
The high levels of divorce that we have across the board in Christian communities. But back then, at the time, divorce was not looked on something all that acceptable in the Christian community.
To me, I just feel like I can't really say much about older politics. I'm not as well versed in that. But for me, modern politics, I feel like, is very much, I understand why the division exists, why there is kind of, to me, it makes sense why evangelicals vote kind of for the right wing. I think it does fit in line with, at least policy wise, why you would want to vote for the right wing. I don't know how much like Democrats really offer, besides maybe some of the kind of more populist elements. I don't know what they can really offer to Christians as much, like what they would really offer to them that would make them want to elect a president. Like, that's I got.
I want to throw out a hypothesis that may explain why Jimmy Carter was hated so much, even by evangelical Christians. My hypothesis is this: that in order to be a politician, and this has been true always, it's not just today, in order to be a politician, You have to be able to play games, which means saying one thing and doing another skillfully in order to accomplish your ends. Saying you're going to aim at this, but in fact you're aiming at something else. Those are games. And Jimmy Carter was totally transparent. He didn't know how to play games. Right. It was always honest. Yep. Jimmy Carter was Jimmy Carter. You saw what he was right there. And that's why he wasn't effective as a politician, because he wouldn't play political games. Now, that raises a question. Evangelical Christians, do they play games? And is that why they love Trump? And my answer to that question is yes. I think there are many evangelical Christians who play games. Jesus called them hypocrites. In other words, they say they're doing one thing, and they actually do another. Deception.
Would you say that no matter what? Like, is that from personal experience, or is that just because of political alignment? That's
just observations I've made about human nature.
I mean, human nature, yeah, but at that point, you kind of have to go after everyone. Like, that's not really.
Well, I think we all have the temptation to play games.
Yeah, I mean,
you and I, and so on, and it's hard to be transparent. One of the reasons why it's so hard to be transparent is because one of the games we play is wanting to be liked by others. So then we put on a front we put on a false front so that people will like us, but that really isn't us.
I don't know. I mean, I've always kind of, again, to me, it's always been, you need to be honest with the people you care about and the people who closest to, but you lie to the world.
That's why you will never be a good politician, Jack.
No, did you not hear? I said, but you lie to the world, because that's what I was saying, is that you don't. I don't know. That's always how I've kind of felt about it. If you look through stories, and I guess this is why I kind of get it, is that, there are a lot of heroes throughout time who lied, especially to power, throughout history, who we consider heroes. When you win a battle, like, as much as people always talk about, like, the honorable combat, I guess, that doesn't really actually exist. You're going to lose if you're honorable, because your opponent's always going to play dirty against you. So the question is like, if you're, you're going to lie you got to lie to win, then I guess the question is who do you lie to? And you got to not lie to someone. You have to be honest to someone. Right. It's a complex thing.
It is. That's what makes politics very complicated.
It is. It's what that's what's funny, is that there are a lot of people out there who kind of come in and say, politics is easy. Like, and they're always the people who kind of go, like, my person is honest. My person is one of the most transparent people, and some of them are. Yeah. It's just that doesn't work, because you're, especially in a democracy, you're playing against so many different people. It was funny, is that you talk about Carter, the way you were talking about him reminded me of the two parties in Russia during the revolution. What was it called? It was Lenin, and it was this other guy. I don't remember what his name was. And Lenin basically was someone he was the politics guy. Like, he would do everything based off of what gets my goals accomplished. What is, like, for the revolution? How do we get the revolution moving, and how do we do that? So he would put people in his party and everything who would push his goals forward. And he was willing to lie. He was willing to, go against his values as long as he got his end results. This other guy completely was the opposite. He would put people in his party who disagreed with him, as long as they were sound, honest, he would put them in his party. And that guy eventually got ousted of Russia because, he was in the way.
He was the czar. He was the czar at the time, wasn't it?
No, I don't. It was.
No, he's talking about
the revolution.
Communist Party. No, in the Communist.
No, it's in the Communist Party. It was in the party itself.
Oh,
there were two.
Trotsky.
It was the Bolsheviks. No, Trotsky.
Okay,
the Bolsheviks and who were the other guys?
Yeah. Well, they were the conservatives, the ones
No.
that wanted to keep. They wanted to keep the czarship. They wanted to keep the
He was friends
authoritarian
with
government that existed.
he was friends with Lenin.
Yeah. I know you're talking about, Jack. He ended up being exiled to, I think
Yeah, he ended up being. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Eventually.
Okay.
but it remind.
So you're talking about the dispute between Trotsky and Lenin at the time, right?
I don't think it
And
was.
Trotsky was the one that got exiled, I believe, and Lenin became.
Yeah,
Might have been might be Trotsky. I might be remembering it wrong.
that's what I thought.
I can look it up.
Okay.
But that might take too long.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's it for really the article because that was.
Again, like my point of bringing that up, the article was just about Carter as a Christ-like example, somebody who lived his life as a Christian in humility and service and love,
honesty, truth.
Yep, and he has not wavered from it. And yeah, I wish he was more revered in the Christian community.
Yeah,
I mean that's going to be really hard. I mean,
he should be more. He should be more revered.
Why? That's the question that you kind of
because of the things I said. Exactly because he is a Christ-like example.
But no one cares about that. That's the thing.
If you are a Christian, that should be what you desire. That's what Christian means. It means Christ-like. And that is what Jimmy Carter is. And so that is why he should be revered.
And then what my point was that there are politicians who put on airs of being Christian and so on, but they really aren't. They don't act like Christians. And that's the game plan that I'm talking about that goes on even among politicians who claim to be Christian.
Oh no, I would say most politicians who claim to be Christians. Again, I'm cynical against most politicians, and again, I completely buy into that idea of there are no political heroes. Everyone. I mean,
and I'm not talking about, and that's why I said I wasn't really talking about the article about him as a political hero.
But that's the only thing he's gonna.
I'm talking about as a Christian hero.
But that's all people are gonna know him for is being president. Like, and I get it. It's
like what? Amen to that.
Yeah,
that is what it should be about.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Carter too was willing to lose.
Yep.
In order to stay truthful, committed to Christian values, he was willing to lose. And again, that's part of his integrity. And he lost. And he admitted he lost, but
I think it allowed him to do so much.
Yeah.
In the end, win. Not the kind of winning that most people want. But
exactly.
I say he won. I would at least say he won personally. Again, that's. I don't know if you guys would agree with me with that, but I say he probably won personally.
I like the way you put that. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I would say is that the only real goal in life is to win. That's the whole point of my kind of point of you lie to the world, but you don't lie to those closest to you, because of the fact that it's about your personal, those are your connections, your personal connections.
All right.
We're moving on to the.
That was our article.
That was our article.
That was just the teaser.
This just makes me look like a bad person.
The new teaser. that we are introducing. It's not our main topic.
No, it's not. But I think the entire conversation just made me look like a bad person.
Why?
I don't know.
Just youthful, Jack. Young and youthful. Sorry, maybe I should have picked an article that had more.
No, it's good. We need the articles because we're talking about a subject that Grandpa's going to be able to talk about it, so I guess maybe not. Because isn't it the future of education? That's what we're doing.
Yep.
So we're moving on. So
and the future of education for Jack's kids.
Yes,
my kids.
And we don't know who they are.
We don't know who they are. This is
21st century education.
21st century education.
Mm-hmm.
About 22nd century education.
Well, sure.
Why don't you start it off, Jack?
Me? I mean, what do you want? I guess.
Well, how do you see the future of education?
I don't know. Complicated. We probably it's this kind of thing of where we're heading into. Here's the thing: is that it's we're beginning better at understanding. For me, I think a lot of the future of education is based in the idea of we're getting better at studying human psychology. I guess a better version of the machine of education is probably what we'll get. Something that's more focused, where you have a more factorized, where it's you kind of there's more use of technology, machines to kind of just get kids in a classroom and insert as much information into them without them doing as little as possible. Trying to maybe homeschool, not homeschool, but at home, you sit the computer in front of them. Maybe it'll just be injected in your head. I don't know. I don't.
Cyberpunk. You just get it hooked up.
I don't think so.
Download.
I think we'll probably have. Mine's going to be the worst because mine is probably going to be the least true. But
completely injected by science fiction.
It's science fiction completely. I wrote I have a complete science fiction. I need to write this down because I don't think it would be like a short story, so I don't have to. It wouldn't be like a actual novel. But I had a whole idea of the dystopia future that I see coming. It won't happen because dystopias never happen the way you think because they always fall apart eventually. But mine is completely complete corporatization. We completely live everything is chosen for us. We have no choice. Basically the complete. You go to an office job or whatever, or robots do all of our manual labor, and we all go to office jobs, and we are in an office community where you can barely interact with your coworkers because of how much it's super antisocial. Socialization has to be built through technological areas, very controlled, very safe. Everything's just safe, sound, protected. You have a house, you have all your necessities met, but you don't really live a life. You just kind of, wake up, eat, go to work, come home, maybe have an animal or something. That's your life. That's how I see it.
That's the way a lot of people live nowadays. What are you talking about? That's right now.
Yeah, completely. No, it's now, but now
people do that to themselves. They don't need anybody to do it to them.
No, but that's the thing is that I see in the future, because there's so many people who do that eventually, and especially because to a lot of people will do it, but eventually once enough people do something where it's just natural to them, eventually it just gets implemented into what you should do. Basically, systems get built around it, especially if you're talking a corporate structure. If corporations and government kind of interconnect in the future, which we're kind of seeing, it's a slow progression of that, then eventually you could have a corporate state where all of that would be mandated by the state itself because it's intertwined with the corporations because they want to make sure that the people are forced to do that. And most people would be fine with it.
Most people will be fine with it?
Yeah, you just said that.
Because they'll be so dumb to it, basically, that they'll just go through
most people would be fine with it because it's not like the typical dystopia where it's, the typical like corporate dystopia that everyone thinks of is like it's like cyberpunk. It's like what's that movie, Blade Runner, where like, it's like everyone lives in the slums, or like RoboCop, where everyone lives in the slums and the rich cats live up. It's like, that's not how corporate dystopias are going to look. It's going to look like you're going to live in like a small apartment, which is going to be nice. It's not going to be like, you're not going to hate it, but it's not, there's nothing it's given to you. And it's just going to be,
and there's no getting more. There's no getting
more. There's no, or if you are getting,
there's the hope. There's always this dangling of the possible opportunity.
Basically, you would probably rank, like, the only possibility is ranking up in your job. So basically, your job possibilities. So like we would still use money, but it would basically be like you either just stay where you are and just live and survive, or you can, graduate up. So there's still be opportunities. It's just that you would have a lot fewer of them because of the fact that a lot of it would be mandated.
To be like the guy in Andor. Is that what you're saying?
That guy from Andor.
The guy in Andor that that he ends up doing that job. He ends up getting that job where he's just sitting at the computer, right? And he lives in the apartment with his mom.
Oh yeah, kind of. Yeah, it would basically be like that.
Right?
Yeah, except your house would be given to you by like a corporate state.
Right.
Not again. I don't think any of this.
Maybe it was. It was given to you, right?
Maybe. I don't.
Sorry, we're talking about something Grandpa has no clue about. So
yeah,
it seems to me you're describing a beehive.
Kind of, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the worker bees and everybody.
Yep.
They all kind of have their own place and they work and they do their thing.
Yep, that's.
Nobody asks anything. Just go about doing your work and in and out, and it's like a beehive.
Yep.
Well, what's the purpose of education?
The purpose of education is to give enough intelligence to people so that they can go and work.
Really?
That's it?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I see for the future. I mean, it's not what I believe. Actually, I don't really know, because the problem is that's what I think.
Now I understand why you described the
future. Look, I went to school, and that's how I felt about schooling, was just basically, here's this information, you keep some of it so that you can go off and work somewhere. You go to college, then you get out of college, then you go into a desk job, you sit at the desk, you do this is why I see the future as this dystopia, because I felt like everything was working towards that. I felt like my entire life was working towards that until recently.
And where did you learn that?
The internet.
Is there anything to your life? Is there anything to your life besides work and then just being at home? I mean, is there anything?
Oh, you mean like my life?
Well, I mean, we're talking about the future, your kid's life.
My kid's life, I would hope so. I hope that doesn't happen.
But what do you hope for them?
I mean, it's up to them. That's really it. Because my hope is that I don't trust.
You're going to build stuff in which they're going to, add, obviously. So you can't just say, "Oh, it's up to them," because
it's kind of up to them. No, you finish.
No, you're part of molding, shaping education now, and they then will stand on your shoulders. What do you want for them?
My hope is that I can educate my kids enough with my own structures. I can actually build, I'm not saying like education, but I guess, because like with the disciplines and ideas that I have to kind of discipline themselves and kind of learn on their own, because you can't trust anyone to teach you anything. You can't trust anyone to teach you anything that actually matters and matters to you.
So I think you just said it.
My teacher my teacher had something where my English teacher had something which is that he said, Like, no one's going to teach you how to overthrow them. No one's going to teach you the stuff that that makes you smarter than them, because then you're going to take their job. And I don't think it's 100% true, but there is like, I think maybe there's a bit of that, you know? I think there's
I think you said it a little bit ago, basically about, which really what it comes down to is learning how to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that really the main purpose of education?
Mm-hmm.
No. What do you mean? Like, what do you? Is that the main purpose of education in theory, or are we talking like what actually happens?
We always talk about theory and reality. We don't. If you just talk about reality, then there's no way to change.
I don't even think that's true in theory, at least in what like the systems you've built really are.
That's why I asked you the question: what do you want for your children? That's a question of openness, of hope.
I told you what I want for my kids, that I can teach them to learn themselves.
Okay.
And I put that in myself because I don't trust anyone else to actually care about that.
Right.
My main thing, like that's, you know, and then hopefully you have institutions which can teach stuff to them that can help make it easier. Like they have more technology or whatever, so that they can make it easier for them to learn.
So one of the things now is, is the changes in technology that are happening, that I think are going to have a dramatic influence on education. So, the fact we have this well-established internet now that is the source, basically has the source of all information, not just all things true, but many false things as well, right? It's loaded with everything out there, where you can find out almost anything you want to, whenever you want to. That's not something, Grandpa didn't have that.
No.
He was going to school. He couldn't access the world's information at his fingertips. He could go to a library, and if it was a good library, he had access to a lot of information, which was very time consuming to find and get to, and find the information that he needed to. But in this day and age, that's made simpler, right? And that's only going to get more so. With the introduction of, that we're getting now with artificial intelligence. So, yeah.
I want to add one thing to the helping students in education learn. And the thing I want to add to that is learn together. So, I just feel that given the future and what we're going to face, we're doing too much individualistic learning and living.
How do you teach someone to work as a group?
What you make them? You give them tasks to do.
How
together.
do you? Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Nothing.
Together.
No one does anything.
Problems solved together. One of the models for me is at Calvin College in the engineering department. And we also did it in sociology, the same model. But in the engineering department, in a senior year, the engineering majors would take on, they would throw out various possible problems in the world that they would then, as a team, have to tackle and solve through the whole semester. And then at the end, they kind of show what they've come up with. And they work together on this. Not individual projects. It's working together.
How do you get like a young group of people how do you get like a young group of people to work together? How do you teach people to work together?
It's part of the class. So they
Then you just
if they
put them
want any
together.
credit, they're going to have to.
No one cares. No one cares about credit. No one does. Maybe some will.
They all have to, because if you have enrolled in the class, if you don't join one of the group projects, you do it off on your own, that's not an option. You have to be part of it.
You just don't do anything. It's the easiest thing in the world.
And then you fail, I suppose.
Who cares? It's fine. You can just coast on through most of the time. You just find, you just make it up, get an individual project,
If you want to, if you say education is for helping students learn how to learn, right?
Yeah.
Working with other students is one of the ways in which you learn how to learn. You learn with each other. You share information. In fact, stop and think of it. If you're solving a problem, working alone compared to having, say, 5 others work with you, look at the resources you can reach out and get. It's 5 times as much that you can actually reach out by working together than doing it on your own. So there's something to be said about.
But you just end up getting the same production value. You get like maybe 1 or 2. That's really what you have.
I don't think so, because I think if you actually did an experiment, then they don't do it. But I think if a sociologist came over to engineering and said, "I want to do an experiment," we'll have 5 individuals do their individual project.
No, not 5 individuals. 5 kids. Get 5 kids.
Well, they're individuals. They're students.
They're students. 5. Let's say
you're talking about high school kids.
I'm talking high school, middle school.
Grandpa's talking about college kids.
College kids who are seniors.
What are we?
High school kids.
Like if you're in college, you've already learned how to learn.
I've seen this work among seniors in high school too.
Maybe it can happen.
Same thing. Yeah, I've seen it work.
Yep.
And it does work.
So should we not have school for younger kids? Is this what? Is this?
Well, I think you can introduce learning together already in first grade. In fact,
But I don't think you got to do it in different ways. You can't just apply it the same way, because college students, you can get them to work together. Partly because, one, the incentive is completely different. When you go to college, your family is paying that money, or you have a scholarship. You're there because it is an investment that you have put into place. Now, that's not. For a lot of schooling, most kids don't actually see the investment in it. Maybe even their parents put an investment down. The kid doesn't actually understand that. And you can't really get them to understand it. It's very difficult to do that. And because the incentives are completely askewed, it's hard to get them to actually work as a team, because there's no incentive to do it. Especially nowadays where kids are becoming more antisocial, there's less of a chance that they're actually going to work together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You get a group of people who were like me in high school, or like people who get 5, kids who don't really like each other, or they don't want to talk to each other or anything. Nothing's going to get done. It's maybe one person does it. Everyone brings an individual. That's the best you get.
So that is an example of, that's one of the points that Grandpa's making in terms of that we need more of it. Okay. And then the other thing you're pointing out is that the importance of the teacher and the teacher running the project. If the teacher does not plan and organize and set the parameters of the project and give the incentives of the project, then it can fall apart. You're right. If it's
it will fall apart.
Done,
it needs to be well done. How does it get well done?
Right.
I'm asking that. How does it get well done?
And that's the teacher that needs to do that. Okay,
then it's not going to get well done at all. It's always going to fall apart. Because you can't rely on a teacher to do that, because they're not 100% 100 good teachers in the world.
Yeah, I question your idea of incentive, Jack. I get the impression that for you, incentive is very selfish.
It is.
What I can get materially. But I don't think that is a complete human nature.
It is. It is at least heavily so.
No, it's not the complete. It's part.
It's heavily,
You say
especially
it's
when
the
you're
only,
younger.
But the reason, if you look at history, the reason that we are where we are today in history is because that principle didn't operate all the time. If that principle is the only principle operating for people getting to do something, is that if they got it, we would not, our world would not be where it is today. Our world would have died a long time ago.
Really?
And so what happened,
how so?
No, let me finish. What happened is that people realized if they only did things for their own personal gain, we're not going to get anything done. In fact, we will die. So there were enough people who realized that and said, hey, we do have to work together. And if we work together, we will find out that the incentive that we thought we really wanted, which was ourselves, turns out to be an incentive that's much bigger and greater. And so it opened their mind.
That's not true at all. That's completely not. Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. Because what you're talking about is people working together
How can you say the United States is where it is if everybody operated on their very narrow self-interest?
I completely.
No, the United States wouldn't be here.
Yeah, it would. It completely.
But, okay, let me take an example.
The world is built on selfish.
Abraham Lincoln. Look at Abraham Lincoln.
Really?
Or let me take Jimmy Carter.
No, you don't want to. I mean, you don't think Abraham Lincoln did things because of the fact that he thought it would help him politically? Like you don't think that's why he did it.
Also did things to help the common good.
I mean, you can say that, but again, I would say that's because the common good is aligned with what his selfish desire was.
In the end, but the selfish desire came about because.
And again, it doesn't matter because you're giving examples of leaders and individuals can. I think
your incentive is always immediate. You have no idea of incentives possibly being secondary payoffs, and that's what I'm trying to open your mind.
It's because it's hard to see it that way, and that's not going to apply to the majority of people. And we're talking about systems. We're talking about building systems.
If you open your mind just a little bit and tried it, and lo and behold, you actually get something that is a secondary effect that's even greater than what your immediate incentive was.
I'm not saying I'm a completely built on my incentives. I would say it's hard to kind of go beyond them. But my thing is that we're building a system. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about systems. You can have individuals and you can have people who are willing to do stuff beyond their personal gain. It's hard to get a large group of those people. It is easier to work off people's personal own self-interest. And self-interest, you're confusing the idea that self-interest means that you will not work or do anything with anyone else. That's not true at all. Because again, that's my point, is that people would work together in a college environment because it is personally advantageous to their own incentives because they have gone there to learn. It was a personal choice.
We're talking about the same thing then.
Yeah, I'm saying that young people, but I'm saying like young students, the kind of like, and that's what I'm talking about overall, because once my kids are old enough, like they're my age, I hope they have learned to learn. Like that's my thing, is that the future of education to me, I get what we're talking about with all of this stuff, but to me, that mold, I mean, it will change, but like college to me has always been more ambiguous. Like it can be whatever it is. It's more about getting the degree in the end that really defines it. To me, I'm talking about younger education because that is the harder and the thing that I think matters more because it is more systematic. Colleges are less systematic inherently. They can be more adaptive.
So then we're getting at another point then. So, education is very broad and it has many different levels.
Yeah.
Right. So is that something like, do we want to focus on here?
I want to focus on
education in the high school level. Is that what we want to focus on and talk about?
High school, I would say high school, sure, because, I've been through high school. I probably remember it the most, but yeah, like lower education, because that's what I feel like we're really talking about here. Because if we're talking about what my kids are going to go through, once they're my age, the opportunities, like hopefully they've learned to learn, because then they have the capability to go. Like, if my reliance on my kids actually having an education, like actually learning anything, is that they go to college, they're screwed. They've wasted almost 20 years of their lives sitting around doing nothing. That's kind of what I do hate about lower school, is that so much of it is kind of just sitting around doing nothing. I felt like so much of my younger life was spent doing nothing. And now it's even more so, because the social aspects are declining as well. Those things that you kind of had in the past of the more like, well, your kids socialize, they have friends, they do, fun things with their friends. That's also declining as well. And we are seeing an increase in education, but I don't think that in like what people are actually learning, like a focus on education. I think a lot of that comes from like a more cultural aspect, not really because we have good teaching institutions.
Yeah, I think, the goal of education, or the goal, if we talk about it in general, post World War II, was to educate to college, right? That to get to higher learning, that's what parents wanted for their kids, right? Because that meant, going to college means getting a better job than manual labor, right? It means getting an occupation, and that's for a long time, right? So I would say that my generation was kind of is kind of the end of that, to some degree, of that was the goal of just getting more and more education, that you could get the better job.
And I don't.
And I think, and so high school education was what we would call college prep.
Yeah,
you're going to high school so that you're preparing yourself to do well in college.
I've mentioned this before about future in education. I know this is already something implemented, but okay. So one thing is, I don't want that for my kids. I don't want my kids' entire lives being built, like youth education being built on them going to college. I want them to be building up to a point where they are adults and they can choose their destiny for themselves, where they can be like, this is where I want to go. Does that mean learning new stuff? Does that mean just exploring, building my own thing? What does that mean? Especially as we do engage in more technology, as the barrier to entry into more and more things is lowering. I want my kids to be able to decide what they want to do with their lives and, actually, I don't know, just learn. I don't want it to just be like, this is your path in life. This is you build up to this point. Now you're going to go off to college. Now you're going to learn this or whatever. I want them to be able to build what they want. And that's why I always liked your Maker Studio thing, Faber, because it tells kids, start making stuff now. Start thinking, start being creative, start building, thinking about what you want your future to be and building towards that, One thing is that I was kind of thinking about is that talking about being a worker is that one thing I kind of find interesting about Canada's education system is that it's two-part. You can choose, or I would assume the parent chooses if their kid is going to go off and be a worker. And saying, I think the idea is that if you're really good at like if you really do well at school, you can kind of go on this track that sets you up more for college. And if you're not as good, it sets you up more on a track to being a worker. To go off and get a job, like a manual labor job. And that kind of was interesting to me. It was like, that would be interesting to kind of, now I don't know how much that would apply to the future, because it is, robots could come in and we could have almost no manual labor jobs. I don't know. Probably not entirely, but there would be a lot of, the future is more manual labor mixed with information, where like something that is strict manual labor, like carrying an object from one place to another, will probably be done more by machines. But like complex things where you're moving something from one place to another that you have to plan out and all that would probably be more complex. But yeah, that I kind of thought that was interesting, and the fact that your kid isn't just prepping for being in college, and that also matters in the aspect of how much money you can actually make, like financials, If you're someone who is not as wealthy, you might not be able to pay for someone to go to college. If your whole education is built on sending your kid to college, that's not good for you because your kid's not learning anything that's immediately helpful to them. Does any of that make sense? Am I just saying?
No, that makes sense. Just, I would say sometimes what can happen with those track systems that's nice to have that. But is it, sometimes it can be it can get stringent, and somebody who maybe wasn't doing well gets forced to be in one of those tracks, and they don't really want to be, right? Or doesn't give them the opportunity. Whenever you put somebody in a track, it's a track.
Yeah.
Right? And how do you switch tracks?
And the question
is there opportunities to switch tracks?
The question is what kind of education system do we want? Like what kind of, that fundamentally comes down to what kind of country, what kind of people do we want to be fundamentally? Like, do we want to be a place where we are, I guess, prosperous, or like, do we want to a place where, you kind of live you have a job and you have income and you can live a nice life and you can have wealth, right? And kind of a nice life. But then you have less choices, or do you have a life where things are more chaotic? Do we have an education system where things are going to be more chaotic entirely within it? Because that's what I'm saying, is that I think if we want a system where, we are trying to make it so that it's more about getting your kids to have jobs, right? Having a safe society, a kind of safe, structured society, then I would say a track system does sound like the best idea. Because even if, someone gets stuck on a track, that doesn't matter that much, because at least they're still going to get something to do. I guess the question is do we want the corporatist society? That's what I'm saying. That's why I think it is the thing that might happen. I'm sorry, I'm being very kind of downer in this. We're all doomed.
We're all doomed.
You guys can
I'm a proponent of, I'll have to go back. I think we are kind of at a crux of education, because, you think, okay, it's the 21st century. It's, we're in the we're almost a quarter of the way into the 21st century. And I think we're finally, having to look and say, things have changed so much that we need to reevaluate what exactly education needs to be. And, and you always have to go through a lot of stumbling to figure that out, to make those changes, because there are things that you don't just throw everything out, because there are standards of education. There are certain things that need to be learned, or certain ways that we teach. Having, the one-on-one teacher-student relationship is important, and that's not something that you just throw out. But there are a lot of new things like that, like I was saying at the beginning, right? The fact that we have all of this information readily available now, that, not having to necessarily memorize all kinds of facts and information, and it's not as important anymore. But being able to recognize where to find that information when you need it, and know that it is the correct information, is more important in this day and age, right? And that's why I'm much more of an advocate for experiences, giving students opportunities to experience things, and try different things. So travel is very, very important to me, and being able to give students the opportunity to go places and be places and to do things, or even try do, something that they wouldn't think that they could do. Like you think about my classes I'll bring out wood and we'll do a project with wood, and I pull out power tools for students to use. And I have students that have never touched a power tool before or ever thought they would touch a power tool. And they have to, learn how to use the power tool to accomplish their project.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's an experience that they have to learn how to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you get that, what you're talking about incentives, getting a sense of accomplishment is a great incentive for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think people learn in the same way?
No.
So I was thinking about this with the incoming of kind of AI technology and whatnot. Would there be a possibility, like, could we build a system in which you could get your kid, or like a way for you to kind of be able to figure out what your kid would learn better doing, and then send them to a school where they would do that?
Yes.
More specialized schools, basically. Instead of having very generic structure-based schools, you have a more specialization.
Yes.
You think that? Okay.
Yes. I mean, there are tests that already exist for that.
Mm-hmm.
I know, because I've had to take them because my ACA teacher is all about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I because that's the only thing I can really say for, like, I think is the optimistic future, because I do optimistic future. Oh my god.
No, but you're right. I mean, like, one of the great things is, you think about AI, right? It can do a much better job of factoring in, like, okay, me as a teacher, right? I've got 24 students in a class that I'm going to design a project for. And I might be able to then input and say, you know what, I want to do a project with this kind of medium. And I've got this student who's an auditory learner, this student who's a visual learner, this student who's verbal, right? This student is kinesthetic, right? So you have these different ways of learning, and AI might be able to take that information and help design the project so that it meets all of those learning differences. It doesn't necessarily mean that each of their experiences is specifically tailored to them, because you want, even if somebody learns auditory, you still want them to experience learning, in the other areas as well. You want to strengthen those and give them as much experience learning in different ways, but you also want to be able to provide the best way for them to learn as well, so that they get it.
So what if you had a school that was basically like, you went to school and you had like one class, and the one class was just teaching you, okay, this is how, like, it focuses just kind of on how you write your name, how you find information, basically like the kind of stuff I learned in my English class, like my essay writing class, where it's just kind of like, how do you find information? How do you kind of write that down in this format, And you did that for like 3 days, or like something like that, or you did that like every day. I don't know. But then as well, you had other things on top of that, or your parent brought you to like basically different areas where you could learn specific subjects and ideas as well. Kind of like college. Like you go to college, right? And like you have a bunch of classes where it's like, these are the fundamental things you need to understand to go to college, right? But then as well, you as a student can add a lot of these different things where you're like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to learn this, and you kind of had that at more different levels.
Yep.
My final contribution to the discussion is the big picture, and that is the future of education depends on whether we as a nation are really going to get serious about investing in education. Right now, teachers' salaries are poor. We don't really put money into education. And so my radical idea is that then instead of a guaranteed income to people, the government should give a guaranteed educational investment annually to each student in the United States. And it's the same amount. And then you can choose where you want to go for that, So if there are 200 students who go to Crescent and they all get the same amount, then Crescent has that amount to decide how to use it to educate these students that we have. And it would be enough so that salaries would be much higher, double what they are now, maybe even more. Plus, there would be plenty of money to purchase things that you need, the tools that you need. But then it would be in the hands of the teachers and administrators of a school to decide how they want to use the resources, how they want to divide it up. And then that way they would attract students. So it's kind of like a charter school idea.
Yeah. That's
right.
more.
So would you say that you would eliminate public schools then?
Every school would be public in that sense.
Right.
I mean, so kind of, but that wouldn't. I mean, not necessarily, because the main.
You could have Christian schools then.
Yeah. No, I agree with the idea.
Per student, it would be the same amount for every student at a certain level. First graders, you get from the government. The government gives you so much for each student you have.
Well, the other thing that's nice about that is
you can have Christian schools. You can have all kinds of charter schools. You can have all kinds of schools going on.
What's nice about that also is that not only do you have kind of because one of the problems with kind of now is that if you pull out of a school, right, and let's say you don't think the public school you're sending your kid to isn't getting them enough of an education. If you pull them out of that and then put them in a private school, right? The money that you have to spend on that entirely now comes from your budget, and none of the money that you actually spend on the public schools get spent on that, right? So you end up basically spending two bunches of money on two educations. And I mean, I know that technically that's not entirely true because taxes work differently, but that basically the money that you're supposed to get for the public school in that situation, if you wanted it, you could pay for something. Like if there was a school that was like, we want more money for a higher education. Like we put more, let's say we buy better technology, we do all these things. You could have parents who could invest more into that. Then you could also end up with another thing where I said with basic income is that what could also happen is that all of the schools just decide to up to a limit where they all, require you to have that much money. So basically if you got a basic, that's my thing with against basic income, for a person was that all the companies are immediately just going to hike all are going to immediately increase the rates of their how much their products cost because they know they can make money off of it. I don't actually know how economically sound that is. I think a lot of economists would probably say I'm stupid for saying that. But
see, I want to say we need to have an attitude of experimentation more than what we do now. You say we don't know whether. Well, then experiment, try it, try.
Well, that's what I would say is that states need to be more willing to do. And again, this is the thing is I think what pushes. This is kind of my final statement. Is that what I think is going to push the future of education and where it goes is entirely dependent on the individuals and what kind of direction our society decides what we're going to go with it. That's kind of is why I think the corporate version of it is what I think might happen because I don't think a lot of parents like really care that much about their kids. I think if parents could have a system in which they could send their kids and guarantee them they learned information, and then that could guarantee them a job, they would do that over actually getting their kids to learn stuff that they wanted to know.
So like apprenticeships? Are you talking about?
No, not like an apprenticeship. Like I'm saying like a machine more or less, where you have a very mechanical education system, the perfected machine of education. I think a lot more parents
would... You could, like you were saying, that you could sit the kid down in front of and it would educate them?
Yeah. I think a lot of parents would probably prefer to do that.
As long as that child is babysat. So
kind of, yeah.
Especially with so many parents that have to have, both parents working full time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one of the issues with our current education system is that we act as childcare.
Yeah.
We are a childcare component for families because both parents have to work full-time jobs and be out of the home, and so they need their children cared for, and too often right now that's becomes the priority. That the main reason I'm sending my kid to school is so that I know that they're safe and cared for, and then they get an education.
and that's a much harder thing to solve, because that's an entire, like, you're talking about the entire economic structure of where we kind of are, and having to solve that, basically. And like, I don't know, like, the best I don't know what kind of how to do that, because like even economists would argue against that, like would argue about what actually needs to be done and what needs to change, and and even then there's a lot of other negative effects that come with that. And so it's you're talking about something that's so, again, this is my thing, is that I think a lot of what's going to push it is the attitude. And if parents, and I don't know how you really do this, I think it's a very personal thing. If parents kind of have that push to care about their kids' education and see it less as a childcare thing and actually about seeing, how do I get my kid to be the thing they want to be? How do they learn what that is? How do they learn to research things at the very least? I guess it's, how do you very personally care for your kids? And that's a very hard thing. I think that's important, because a movie I really like. There's this movie I really like called. It's got the lead. It was made by the lead singer of Talking Heads,
David Byrne.
Yep, he made a movie. I think it was called like In the Life of, or something like that. None of us will have ever seen this movie. I know it's here.
It's like a documentary, or
no, it wasn't. But it was. It's called True Stories. That's what it's
True
called.
Stories. Yeah,
it's called True Stories. You remember?
I've seen the movie.
You've seen True Stories.
Yeah, I sure saw True Stories.
There is a moment in the movie. We need to watch a bunch, because we need to watch that, and we need to watch Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah.
That's one I gotta watch. But in True Stories, there's a moment where it's the guy, like the corporate guy, he owns like the giant business, right? And it's at his family's dinner table, and he's talking about how kind of the future of the world is that, people stop going to the factory. Like the money that they're making for the factory doesn't just go, it's kind of this persistent loop, but it actually starts going into what people want to do. That the future is people deciding what they want to do, what they want to spend their money on. And I do see that as the future. But I also see the corporate kind of repetitiveness, complete control over your life, where you get given food. Basically, I see a world in which people can choose what they want, what their job is. They can choose, like, whatever ridiculous idea you have for what a job can be, you can decide to do that. And you can put money into it, and you can build that kind of life for yourself. Or we become a corporate economy where your life is decided by whatever company you work for. But you live. It probably won't be either of those. It'll probably be some kind of mixture and something more complicated. Life's harder than... I really do hope that like the ideas of investing technology into like your makerspace idea, I think I want to see that. I want to see more out there ideas for education, especially younger education. And I see that, but I also think that it's in a race against kind of very mechanized education. And I think if we can build mechanized education, where like even you have robots teaching the classes, you don't need teachers anymore, and you can just put the kids in front of that, you just shuffle them in the class, they sit down and they get taught, and then they get up and then they go home, and that's what they do. I could see something like that happening where that's just what they do, and then or you could even like maybe like VR, you put your kid in the VR headset and they go to class,
right,
and they get taught all the information, and then you pull them out of it, and then they just get to, continue their day, and then those kids go off to some job because it's, it's mandated by giant corporations. So then you go into like a data entry job and you just sit at a desk and you type away. Sorry, but that's my last idea. What do you...
corporate model of yours.
The corporate model of mine, I think
wow.
I think it's because that's what people, I don't think it's what people deep down want, but it's what people would like. If you had to choose between like a far out idealist idea of like you can be what you want when you're like someone who's poor, or you're like even like middle class and you're constantly worrying about your bills and everything, like that's, and then someone's like, you get a nice place to live, food, you don't really have to worry that much about doing your bills and everything. Between those two options, you would choose the second option, like where things are more controlled, you don't have as many choices. Like if you could choose a safe world but you don't get any choice in it, people would rather have that than a more difficult, less secure world but you get to actually do what you want. Faber, what's your final comments?
I think I think the future of education is bright. It has I see a lot of promise of new ways of doing things, and giving more and more students opportunities. And so I know it's like right now, I think we're going through a very difficult time because it's kind of like growing pains in a way.
I think we're just going through a difficult time in general.
Well, we are. It's true. And that's part of it is just because we're trying to figure out what this 21st century is going to be, what it's going to look like. It makes it very, very difficult. And it can seem hopeless. But I actually think that there's a lot of promise of what things can do, and technology wise, or even just the ways that we educate, and new ideas in education that I think can be more equitable. Just like Grandpa was saying, there are these ideas out there of trying to make, education more equitable for different communities.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's been a big problem for a long time. And it continues to be a problem right now that we're trying to figure out is how do we fairly educate people from different economic, standings. It's not enough just to build a brand new building and give a community, all the technology that they need, that doesn't guarantee that those people are going to get a good education. You need to have good educators.
Yeah, and
robot educators.
my last contribution, or I already made one, but that is, I think we as a nation have to seriously start investing in teacher salaries, because we need the best and the brightest to be teachers. And the thing is,
drives people to those positions, right? Exactly. I mean, you look at where people, what do you want to be? Oh, I want to be a lawyer or a doctor. Well, why is that? Well, they get paid the most.
Yeah.
Right.
But in a way, we already have teachers who have ideas and want to do things, and they're hampered, not just because they're low salary, but because the resources that they need in order to do the things they really already know they want to do and could do.
Yep.
I think we have to invest in teachers' salary. We have to invest in our schools.
Yep.
A lot more than what we're doing. Otherwise,
imagine if we invested in
Jack's kids are in peril.
Yeah. Imagine
my
if
kids
we
will be
invested
fine
in our education the amount that we invest in our defense.
Oh, don't bring that up. That's the worst comparison you could
saying.
do.
I'm just saying, imagine.
It's a very good comparison.
No, it's not. It's not at all.
It's too. What is the investment in the military? What are we investing in? Actually?
The very devices we build to make sure we don't all die in nuclear hellfire. Those kinds of things. Like, it costs a lot to build that kind of stuff.
Right, but you have to have educated people that know how to make those things.
Not really.
Yes, you do.
Have you listened to the intelligence of your normal military man? Like,
I'm not talking about a military man. I'm talking about people that design and build those things. Military men don't design and build those things. They just say, I need something to be able to do this. And then they go to the educated.
That's not what I'm not saying.
And say, you go design that for me and build it for me and test.
No, we have those things. We need to, but like again, it's going to be really expensive to buy those things. I get what you're saying, but we obviously aren't having a problem with that. That's not a problem. Buying those things is a problem
with that.
Buying those things is something that is a huge concern. Like, again, I don't think they're comparable. Like, they're not.
No one is saying here that we shouldn't spend money on defense. No one is saying that.
We need to spend a lot of money on defense.
We invested in education like we invest in defense.
Yeah.
Like,
that's all I'm saying.
It's not comparable at all. They're not. It really isn't. Anyway, I would say that, Grandpa, you will probably like this book. Or at least you would probably like Soul. He's very similar. He's very much he's big into trying to make it so that more people have more education. He very much believes in that idea. That's what he spent a lot of his later years doing, kind of like talking, building ideas. So, or you'll hate him because he's an economist. I don't know.
No, I like economists. Sure.
I think that's it, right?
Yep, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see you. Are we doing this weekly now?
Bi-weekly.
Okay. We'll see you.
That's a pretty fast pace. I guess I want
2 weeks from now.
Sure.
That's bi-weekly, right?
I have it on my calendar, and I guess I'm supposed to come up with an article, right?
Yep. We gotta give that to you.
And then the topic is sports. What I like about them, or which ones I like.
I wanted to talk about the future of sports and kind of how that goes into.
All right, you plan on that.
Yeah.
All right.
So don't leave yet. Actually, I wanted to say something, but this was the end of the podcast. We'll see you next time.